Thank you for attending today. It's been a long time that I wanted to present at 𝗘𝗨𝗟𝗧. I was intending to present in Rome, and unfortunately forces threatened the 𝗘𝗨𝗟𝗧 conference, and I was asked to withdraw and not come, but here I am. And so we have a world problem of radicalization online, in my opinion. And I'm here with my mentor, Dr. 𝗘𝗗𝗨𝗖𝗔𝗧𝗜𝗢, a co-founder of the program in psychiatry and the law at Harvard Medical School, Dr. Barry Roth. My disclosure is I have written several books. I also have an online course on my website, freedomofmind.com. And that's the reason the 𝗘𝗨𝗟𝗧 was threatened that I couldn't come or else they would cancel the entire conference. And how did I get here? I was recruited into a cult when I was 19 years old in 1974. The same month that Patty Hearst was abducted by the Symbionese Liberation Army. I was deceptively recruited by women flirting with me after a girlfriend dumped me abruptly, and I had no sense whatsoever that I was going to be recruited and radicalized to basically be anti-democracy, pro-theocracy. And so it's been a 46-year effort of activism. I became a mental health professional. And I realized after 40 years of activism, nothing was changing. In fact, things were getting worse. And thanks to the people at the program in psychiatry and the law, and particularly Professor Michael Commons, he said, this is really important stuff. You need to do a doctoral program, do a quantitative study on your model, which I know has been helping people exit destructive authoritarian cults. So I did it. And so this is the document for lawyers and mental health professionals to read. I'm just going to read the title because I tried to get as many search terms into the title as I could. The BITE model, which is my model, which I will explain in a minute, of authoritarian control, undue influence, thought reform, brainwashing, mind control, trafficking, and the law. So if you're not aware, but in the DSM-5, 4, and I believe 3, there was a dissociative disorder category without specific symptoms listed. But I want to read it very quickly. Identity disturbance due to prolonged and intensive coercive persuasion. Individuals who've been subjected to intense coercive persuasion, e.g. brainwashing, thought reform, indoctrination while captive, torture, long-term political imprisonment, recruitment by sects and cults, or by terror organizations, may present with prolonged changes in and conscious questioning of their identity. And we've been hearing about millions of Americans and people around the world who their family and friends have described as they became totally a stranger. They started espousing these crazy beliefs, and we try to talk to them, and nothing works. And unfortunately, most folks then give up out of self-protection because the person's trying to recruit them, or it's just too painful. And so a lot of folks have cut off contact with their loved ones who are in the cult of Trump, MAGA, QAnon, conspiracy theories, etc., which is the opposite of the way to help people, which is warm, loving engagement. I'll get into that in a minute. But the key point I want to emphasize is it's a dual identity model. Robert J. Lifton, whose book, a 1961 book, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, was used in my deprogramming from the Moonies after a near-fatal van crash where I was away from the group sleeping. I was sleeping 3 to 4 hours a night, working 18 to 21 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the real Steve Hassan had the Mooney Steve Hassan that was suppressing me, but away from the group and the constant reinforcement, I missed my sister who I was always very close with. I had been instructed by the cult that my family was satanic. But I reached out to her, and long story short, I agreed to a deprogramming voluntarily, not because I wanted to leave or I thought I wasn't in a cult or a brainwashed, because I was very convinced I was not in a cult and I wasn't brainwashed as a Moonie. But I wanted to prove to my family that I wasn't brainwashed. So it was kind of that was the major motivation. And my father said to me, Steve, listen to what they have to say, have an open mind, but if you want to go back after several more days, I'll drive you there myself, but at least your mother and I will be able to sleep at night knowing we did the responsible thing. And for me, that touched my heart because he was crying. And I had not seen my father cry. So think about this dual identity. People are rescuable. And we're hearing about former cult members coming out of white supremacy cults, all types of cults, and they're very powerful agents to help not only educate, but also to de-radicalize folks. American law and international law talks about trafficking. So it's a crime to use force, fraud, or coercion. And basically, mind control, for the most part, is without the force. When we talk about pimps and traffickers, there often is physical force. For some of the extremist terrorist groups, there is threat of force and coercion. But I'm using that as a platform to build on my model, which I hope will catch on internationally. I'm right now not very hopeful about the United States with the Supreme Court that we have, but I'm hoping that, that this knowledge will be shared around the world. The state of California has done some very innovative work protecting elderly people and actually developed a model of undue influence and trained care professionals to help determine undue influence. And I know that this is very small. It's all in my dissertation, and my dissertation is on my Freedom of Mind website. But I'm going to, in the interest of time, I want to share Law Professor Emeritus Alan Scheflin's model called the Social Influence Model. And he basically says you have the influencee and the influencer, right? And you have the who, what, when, where, how. And this is a framework that expert witnesses can use to talk to judges and juries and say, Your Honor, yes, so-and-so invaded the Capitol, but what were the influences that made the people invade the Capitol? Alex Jones, Donald Trump, Fox News, etc. But this is a framework that I think really is very powerful and effective. And my BITE model is really the techniques of influence. I wanted to put a few slides in because as we're looking at the influencer, it turns out that most destructive cult leaders are malignant narcissists, which is a term that Erich Fromm coined. It's not in the DSM, but he basically said, you know, narcissism is the grandiose self-centered behavior, the fantasies of power, success, and attractiveness, need for praise and admiration, sense of entitlement, and lack of empathy, critical. But the malignant side is they think they're above the law, they're pathological liars, they're exploitative, they're sadistic, they're harassing and silencing, they're often violent, they're paranoid, and inability to trust. This is the profile of 90% of the problem authoritarian cult leaders in the world. I will add in chapter 3 of the Cult of Trump, I took Trump and I compared him with Jim Jones, Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, and my former cult leader, Sun Myung Moon, with quotes from all of them that demonstrates this malignant narcissism pattern. So thanks to Dr. Barry Roth last night, who said, he's going to be the discussant in a panel we're doing on Thursday morning with Dr. 𝗘𝗗𝗨𝗖𝗔𝗧𝗜𝗢. He said, why does the description say you have two models? You have one model with two parts. And I was like, you're right, duh. But the first framework to understand is ethical influence is informed consent, right? Unethical influence is deception, outright lying, withholding vital information, or distorting it to be palatable. Because in my experience, I didn't want to leave my family, drop out of school, throw out my poetry. If I even asked the women, are you part of a religious thing? Oh no, not at all. But within a few weeks, I was bowing to a picture of Sun Myung Moon reciting a pledge to defend Korea. And so in this particular slide, and we did it for colorblind people, this is an updated version with gradients. Love, hate, it's easy to understand, and it's easy to know malignant narcissist leaders are bad news for everybody, and healthy leaders take accountability, they apologize if they screw up, they're open to other points of view, they know their limitations, and they're good at delegating to people who are smarter than them or more qualified in things. And organizations need to have checks and balances to prevent abuse of power. And of course, the unethical stuff. I'm going fast, and I'm happy to talk and do questions and answers because I think we may have more time. So when I was helped out of the Moonies by being exposed to Chinese communist brainwashing criteria by Robert J. Lifton, I was like, wait a minute, because as a Moonie, they were Satan, we were God, but we do the same things they do for brainwashing. This does not compute. It led to my realization on the final day that I needed to decide if I was going back to the cult or not, that Moon was a pathological liar. And I had heard him personally because I was elevated to leadership, so I got to be part of major meetings. And I should say that I hated Nixon before the Moonies, and then I'm fasting for 3 days on the Capitol stairs. Went during Watergate because Moon said God wanted him to be president, right? So anyway, as I was learning about all of the other models, Margaret Singer's model, Edgar Schein's model, and then I learned about cognitive dissonance theory of Leon Festinger, who wrote a pivotal book in the 50s called When Prophecies Fail. And he talked about thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and how humans want to have congruence between behaviors and thoughts. So there's a very strong rationalizing factor that people have if you can get them to do extreme behaviors. And I basically organized, thoughts, feelings, behaviors, there's something else, and I realized information control was vital, because that's how people get sucked in. People are trained not to listen. The media is the enemy of the people, or don't talk to those ex-members or apostates, they're evil. So they're controlling information. You're churning in your friend or your family to the leaders. There's a whole, I have a very long list on my website and in the doctoral dissertation. But I basically say the more BITE, the more authoritarian it is. So sleep control, food control, changing people's names, isolating them, teaching them thought-stopping techniques, which I was trained to do, phobia indoctrination. When I was in the Moonie cult, the Exorcist movie came out, and Moon rented a movie theater in Greenwich Village, and 100 of us went to see it. And then we went up to Tarrytown, and he said, God made the Exorcist movie. This is a prophecy of what would happen if you leave the Unification Church. And this Jewish boy who didn't believe in Satan and didn't believe in evil spirits, was afraid of my own thoughts because I was told that these are really invisible demons and beings trying to invade my mind. So I had to stay pure, so I had to chant or pray or sing holy songs to keep out the doubt. But this formed my cult identity, to keep down the real Steve when I was asked to throw out my poetry as an act of commitment. Well, if it's for God, I guess I need to do that, right? So the BITE model, Scheflin's model, in the context of the influence continuum, right, connect all the dots with brainwashing models. My hope is that we are going to see a transformation in therapeutic jurisprudence to, instead of we keep hearing, oh, it's a slippery slope, no one can define what undue influence is other than you're a minor or you're an elderly person with dementia. What about it? And Dr. Gsell and I and Dr. Roth will be talking more about this on Thursday morning. I felt the need to include hypnosis in this. It's an area that 4 years out from the Moonies, I was like, I've read all the literature on social psychology and brainwashing, there's something missing. And I was invited to a workshop on hypnosis based on NLP, or neuro-linguistic programming. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of it. Just a few, yes. So that was a system based on Milton Erickson's, psychiatrist Milton Erickson's process-oriented approach to hypnotherapy. And basically there's no regulation. I believe in Israel there's a law against hypnosis if you're not certified. I don't know for sure. But what's happening online, oh, I should also say, has anyone heard of the Center of Humane Technology? Tristan Harris. Anyone heard of a documentary called The Social Dilemma? Okay, a couple of people. Go see this movie. It's a documentary of former Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter executives talking about how they would manipulate the algorithms to make people attentive so they could sell advertising revenue. And I recently did an interview with him about how staring at a screen hour after hour with hypnotically programmed videos that are being suggested through algorithms has radicalized huge numbers of people in the United States. So I'm going to leave it there. One more graph of note, because people, again, are a little bit confused. They may have been exposed to TM and got their secret mantra that was unique to them, decades ago. They're what I refer to as fringe members. They didn't join, they didn't go up the thing, they didn't worship Maharishi as the enlightened master on the earth. They didn't pay $3,000 believing they can levitate. And, but it's an authoritarian cult, and I've helped many people exit. And recently, a former teacher of TM blocked a multi-million-dollar VA grant by the David Lynch Foundation, where they were going to teach veterans TM and get them into the cult. I should also say, the cult of Trump, I realized in researching it, are made up of authoritarian cults. So while you may think people were following Trump, 30 to 40 million Americans are in what's called New Apostolic Reformation churches. This is a new version that's pseudo-Christian, where the heads say, I'm an apostle or a prophet of God, and I get direct revelations. And they do BITE control over their members. They supposedly speak in tongues, cast out demons, do faith healings. And it's the people believing that if they don't follow their apostle, Satan's going to invade them. They do exorcisms too, by the way. This has been mischaracterized by the media as white Christian evangelicals. The evangelicals I know like the Bible and Jesus, who said, my kingdom is not of this world. These are people involved with dominionism and Christian nationalism that want to destroy the separation of church and state. So, we need to develop, and that's what I'm working on, and I need more people to help, and we want to do further research to evaluate undue influence. And that means not just asking a cult member, are you brainwashed? Because they'll say, of course not. That's what I said for 2.5 years. But talk to their families. You know, track, research the group. And there are so many other things. I don't know what happened here. Anyway, how am I doing on time? So with that, I want to say we need this so badly, in my opinion. Internationally, China, I consider to be an authoritarian cult. Russia is an authoritarian cult. And they want to create chaos. They want a polarized United States. They want guns because they want Americans to kill each other so they can do their dastardly deeds elsewhere and help to and protect fossil fuel industries and a bunch of other things. So with that, I'm going to wind up, but I hope that we'll have time for questions and answers. Thank you very much.